everybody. I am incredibly excited to share with you all the second interview in the Boss Rush interview series. This month's interview is with John Ribbins and Simon Bennett of Roll7, the development team behind the great Ali series, Natakiro, and just recently, Laser League. John is the creative director at the studio, and Simon is the lead marketer for their games. Thanks for tuning in. I'm incredibly excited for this in-depth dive into the design philosophies and the genius of Roll7. As always, if you enjoy what you see, like and subscribe. The larger we get, the more recognition we can give to these phenomenal games and the creative minds behind them. Now, on to the main event, our interview with Roll7. Enjoy. How did you guys first get into playing games? What was the first step into the industry for you guys?
Yeah, the first step into the industry for us was making. It was a weird way in, I guess. We used to be an education provider, teaching multimedia, digital multimedia, so music, photography, film, and like various other bits, DJing. And in about 2004 or 5, someone said, "Can you guys do a video games course or making video games?" And we just blindly said yes. And Tom, the director of that education company and subsequent director of Roll7, went on a forum for a not that well-known piece of software called FPSC, First Person Shooter Creator,
Okay.
And put a post in the forums asking for someone who might be open to kind of creating a course for video games. And John was the only person who got back to us.
Oh, wow.
No, I was the only person over the age of 15 that got back to you.
And I'll leave John to explain his first entrance, because your first entrance into the video games industry was probably slightly earlier than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, my dad was a teacher, and at some point there was a leftover Atari 520 ST at the school that he brought home. which was, it had various bits and bobs on it, and I think there was a kid in his school who basically like ripped games and copied them, and so he'd kind of like every now and again would like give my dad a little box of 3.5-inch floppy disks with like Flying Shark and like Terminator the game, whatever on it. So I ended up with this really big collection of games on Atari.
Piracy.
That is...
Yeah, it was piracy, but it was piracy, back before it was millions of people could download a torrent. It was took you 20 minutes to copy it. It's not any better really, but I didn't.
It's even worse.
I didn't know any better. I was like 6.
Yeah, right. That's what they all say.
Exactly. But one of those discs had BASIC on it, where you could like type, print hello, go to line 6 and whatever. And I got like a comic book annual, and it was when comic book, some of those things like in the back, it would have like 7 pages of basic code, and it'd be like type this all in, and it would make a game happen. Me and my friend laboriously spent a Saturday afternoon copying out all of the basic code in the back of this comic books annual into BASIC to try and make a game, which didn't work, but it at least sort of taught me how to make text appear on the screen and stuff. And so my first foray into making video games was making very short, probably terrible, like text games. Like, there is a tank. Do you get in the tank? And you'd press yes, and it would go, you got in the tank. And you'd say no, and it would go, you didn't get in the tank. And so, like, I guess that interest had always been there. Hence, like, trying to find ways to make video games. And obviously, there was a point before sort of Unity and Unreal where, getting into that kind of stuff was super hard to do. So I'd kind of played around with messing with Doom, or like opening Sega Superstar Soccer and like turning all the textures into JPEGs, making the pitch a different texture and whatever. Mm-hmm. And through all of that stuff, found this first-person shooter creator, which was like drag and drop. You could make your own very basic sort of first-person game. And I was on the forums for that, and like I'd done quite a lot of modding on it and messing around with it and stuff and making new textures and things. And so then I saw Simon and Tom's post saying, is there anyone out there who could sort of teach how to use this software? And at that point I'd been quite involved with the people that make it, like in new ideas for what it could do, or like making a little asset pack of new doors or whatever. So I was like, yeah, I could show other people how to use this. And wanted to work in games, and didn't have 3 years experience and 2 ship titles under my belt, and so that seemed like a good entry point. So
yeah, for sure.
That's how I through bad luck and poor judgment, I don't know, we all ended up working together on those courses, and they were, strangely enough, correct me if I'm wrong, so I think those ended up being some of the most popular of the various multimedia courses. The making video games actually ended up being one of the more popular courses.
Yeah, it was. I guess it was a total USP from our company's perspective. We sort of teaching young people all over London and the southeast, and young people back in the mid 2000s. None of them even knew that making video games was something that was remotely possible. Right. A lot of them probably had their own music software, or were, able to do those sort of bits. But I think it was incredibly new, and we developed the 2 first level, stage 1 and stage 2 courses in the whole of the UK. So oddly enough, our background is not sort of your average entry into the video games industry, because I'd say probably for the first, where are we? For the first 4 or 5 years, we weren't even making any games. And then after that point, we were making games using like, not normal games, using the NeuroSky brain-computer interface headset for however many years. So we didn't really start making our own proper games, funnily enough, that weren't educational or weird or sort of doing something different till 2012. So it's quite a long sort of a long time. Where are we? 2004 to 2012.
6 years we did educational stuff, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Whether that was teaching people how to make games, or whether it was working with someone who had a piece of technology or a bit of funding to do something where the game was almost secondary, right? It was like, we want to teach you something, and games is a fun way of teaching you that. And so that's kind of
I see.
where we started. And I think the goal in the background, we were always like, it'd be great to do something where we don't have to teach you something educational. We're just doing something fun.
Exactly.
But I'm sure as a lot of people find, like, getting the sort of funding and stuff to do that can be quite a challenge.
Right. So John, as a creative director on games, where does your brain first go when you think of ideas? Is there a specific inspiration you're like, I've always wanted to make this, or I've always wanted to do this or that with the game. I've always wanted to put this mechanic in the game. What kind of game first pops up in your head, or ideas pop up in your head while bringing up the idea?
Early bit. I think in the early, like all of the stuff that we've done, whether that's Ollie Ollie or Not a Hero or Laser League, they've all started as super simple prototypes.
Okay.
And I think the reality is, it's not like we can go over the last however long it is we've been running. There's been those 3 ideas, and they were like the standout things we were absolutely going to do. Like there's a folder of 70 dead prototypes on my computer, like other stuff that was like, oh, it'd be great to do whatever. There's a snowboarding game in there. There's a kind of like fantasy thing where you're an archer and you fight orcs and stuff. And like, so there's lots of ideas that have come along, like, oh, that could be interesting.
Right.
Kind of get it started, and then it's kind of very much like, does that stick? There's ideas that you come up with that are quite fun, but then either they're not interesting to keep working on, or you realize, like, design wise it's a dead end. This is a cool mechanic, but I don't really know how it gets harder or whatever. And I think with all of the stuff that we've actually then ended up sort of continuing with, like, Ollie Ollie is a good story. Like, so Simon had a break, like went on holiday. I think it was literally just before you went away, so that I'd kind of finished the very first sort of real prototype of Ollie Ollie, where you could go along.
You showed it to me at the leaving dinner.
At the pub, at the pub for your, like, leaving to go away on holiday for a couple months, and you had it on your phone, and then it was basically like, while Simon was away, he was still sending like high scores back. We didn't have like an online high scores, right? Prototypes, just sending screenshots of scores.
Gotcha.
And then coming back and being like, I've played that prototype on holiday more than I've played commercial games that are on my iPhone.
Wow.
And we'd all still kind of been playing it as well. And it was like, there's definitely something here. Like, this little toy that we've made is definitely, like, sticky. It kind of resonates. So it's worth putting more time into that. And in the meantime, other things have been prototyped and thrown around, and they haven't stuck. So I think there's that element to it. And then with something like Not a Hero, that was that started off as one prototype, and then other elements of it. So like Bunny Lord, the main character, his weird briefings where it uses randomized text to make him say funny or nonsensical things, like, that started off as something completely different. Like, that was just what's the word? Like a parody of adventure games. So it was just side quests. It was a game where you went into a scene and a guy gave you a side quest, and it just randomly generated all the stuff you'd have to do for the side quest. You didn't even do the side quest. It just said stupid stuff. And it was like, okay, there is no output for this, but then we're making Not a Hero, and it's like, well, we've got this Bunny Lord character and we want him to give you these briefings. And I think at some point I just put in that generator into that thing. And it was like, oh, that's really funny. How can we amalgamate that, right? So that, sometimes it's one good prototype you build on. I think sometimes it's like, you've got this one bit and then you realize that something else you did 6 months before that was kind of a dead end actually fits really nicely into this other element you're working on now, and you can kind of build those bits together.
So with the original Ali Ali, correct me if I'm wrong, you pitched that game to Shahid Ahmad of PlayStation, correct?
Yes, we did.
How did that pitch go originally?
So we did another game before we did Ollie Ollie called Gets to the Exit, which you won't have heard of, which was a mobile game, and I think that was the first commercial thing we did that was just, wasn't educational. It was just supposed to be fun.
Right.
Uh, and we sort of launched that after the golden era of mobile had just passed, and we were in the sort of race to the bottom era in mobile. Not to say you can't make a good mobile game make money now, but I think we just got there too late, and so it sort of reviewed quite well, but disappeared. And we were kind of going to shows like Develop in the UK and Resd in the UK, and walking around with an iPad trying to find members of the press and get them to play Gets to the Exit. And at the same time, I had that Ollie Ollie prototype on the same iPad. And I bumped into another developer, James Marsden, who's based in Brighton, and he looked like a skater. So I just was like, oh, I've got this game, do you want to play it? And they were already in touch with Sony, and they kind of put us in touch. He was like, you should show this to the guys at Sony. And so we went and told them all about the educational stuff we do. And I think interest was gradually falling in the meeting. Right. Tom, the other founder and director, was going like, show them Ollie Ollie. So I showed them Ollie Ollie, and she had just sat there for 20 minutes and sort of played it and didn't talk. And then sort of put the iPad down and was like, do you want to bring this to, like, this would be perfect for PlayStation Vita.
Absolutely,
do you want to bring this to the Vita? And we just sort of said, like, we'd never previously had the opportunity to have someone like fund and back one of our entertainment games. And so we were like, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to. And then we walked out of the meeting and went, we should probably Google what the Vita is and maybe get one.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Never heard.
Yeah, well, what's a Vita,
Yeah. But I think, we were very lucky there in that we did, like I sort of jokingly said, we missed the golden era of mobile, but I think we hit the golden era of Vita at that point when like a bunch of really good indie games came out at the same time, and it sort of got its second wind, and we were lucky that Ollie Ollie came out in that point where Vita was at sort of peak popularity, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. It's like, Ollie Ollie 2, Ollie Ollie 1 came out in 2013, correct? Yeah, I want to say 2013.
2014.
2014. Okay, yeah, and then Ollie Ollie 2 came out the next year. 2014 was really an indie renaissance. It was a huge year for indie games. You had Shovel Knight coming out. That was ginormous. So yeah, you guys definitely launched Ollie Ollie in the correct time frame. So the early concept of Ollie Ollie, how much different did it look to the final game?
So visually very different.
Okay.
I mean, the original one was like 16 by 16 sprites.
All right.
And then the final one was twice the size at a whopping 32 by 32 sprite. So we had a bit more detail in there. But I mean, the original game was going to be randomly generated. And the original game was going to kind of, in the sort of meta game, was going to have a lot more kind of RPG elements. Like you were going to, I don't know if you ever played the original like Thrasher Skate and Destroy on PlayStation 1, but it was going to work a bit like that. Like you'd have basic tricks and you'd kind of level up your XP and unlock new tricks as you went along, and you'd have like a skill tree of tricks that you'd learn.
Okay.
And that's kind of everything that we'd planned to do, all that stuff. Like we planned to have random levels and we planned to have this kind of like unlocking skill tree of tricks. And in making the game, the first thing we did was make all the tricks, and then we built one handmade level in which to test them in. Mm-hmm. And then in doing that, we realized that the most fun was that everyone was playing this same one level and battling for the high score on it. And we realized, like, if it was randomly generated and you just had these random levels, you wouldn't have that element of it, that element of being like, I just found out a way to get an extra 1,000 points by doing one more spin off that ledge before you finish the level or whatever. And similarly, like, it felt weird not to have all the tricks unlocked, like, because it's hard enough just to do the tricks. And so it didn't necessarily have to lock you out of doing them. You were locked out of doing them by the limit of your own skill.
I think we took that, like, that very first level that you built, John, we took that to E3, and that's what we showed all the journalists, and we were sort of on the flight over, and Tom and I were just literally trying to one up each other, and it was like, yeah, if you randomize this and lock tricks out, we're just not going to be able to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, yeah, a lot of what's good about our games comes from time and discussion and playing together and finding out what is, finding the toy, finding the thing that is actually fun about it. And often the thing that you think will be fun initially, or what, your hypothesis about the thing that people will latch onto is often totally wrong, and it's something else. And it's about being able to adapt to that, to that whole thing. Like Ollie Ollie, you used to have to hit a perfect landing every single time.
Wow.
Then we realized that was just too hard. We took that to PlayStation at the Alpha Milestone. They were like, even our best QA guy can't get like 100 meters in this game. Like you need to have a think about this. And we sort of take it for granted that Ollie Ollie plays how it does now, but all of that is a result of trial and error and being open to new ideas and having a bit of humility as well. So yeah, I don't know, John, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that even with something like Laser League, like before Laser League was Laser League and it was 3D and shiny and everything else, there were 2 years when that game was literally each player was a different coloured square and the lasers were just lines.
Oh, okay.
And it, it's not like we were intently working on that every single day of the week, but
Right.
It would be the case that we'd kind of take it to there's an event called Multiplay in London, which was like indie devs would go to this bar and everyone would set up local multiplayer games, and people come and just play local multiplayer. And so if you're doing stuff like that, you'd take it and people would play it and you'd be like, yeah, okay, that thing we thought was great, it's not great, or like that element that we hadn't really considered is really popular. And the same kind of thing with Ollie Ollie and Not Here as well, like taking them to like indie meetups and stuff like that, and just seeing a lot of people play them when they're in that really early stage where you can still kind of iterate, change stuff without it being a massive overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, having the humility to be like, yeah, that thing we put in is really crappy, or that thing I didn't think was going to be popular, everyone's really into that bit.
Right.
And that's what we should kind of build on, I guess. Like I think something a lot of people have said with Ollie Ollie and Not a Hero as well, and hopefully will say with Laser League, is like, that a lot of our games are a couple of very simple concepts that are like really refined, and I think that's kind of our process of making games has meant that's what happens, right? We focus very much on this small set of mechanics and trying to refine them to make them really fun to do, and kind of that you build on your skill as a player to be better at those mechanics, rather than just after 10 hours you unlock this new thing that automatically makes you better.
Exactly.
You unlock that by playing it for 10 hours and actually getting that good at the game. That's kind of where we've gone, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So the development, the turnaround from Ollie Ollie 1 to Ollie Ollie 2 was pretty quick. It was a year. What was the mentality behind the sequel? Like, what was the atmosphere like at the studio coming off of the successful first game?
Sheer desperation. I don't think it's too sort of giving away too much to say anything. We signed Ollie Ollie 2 with PlayStation before Ollie Ollie 1 had even come out.
Oh, wow.
They were that confident that the game was going to be a hit. We weren't at that stage. We were fundamentally questioning why on earth they would really want to kick off a new one straight away. But I think they realised something that we hadn't quite sort of come to terms with, which is, you've got a team there who've built a game, and you can, if you lose that team because your funding's run out, then you're not going to, you're going to lose the people who achieved that first game. So that they made a sort of the leap and said, look, we want Ollie Ollie 2. And actually, at that stage, we really didn't know what Ollie Ollie 2 would necessarily be. And we were so, like, John at that point was working on Not a Hero and wasn't able to sort of be 100% focused on Ollie Ollie 2. So it was a mixed time, because we had lots of ideas, but we didn't really have a super concrete idea for what Ollie Ollie 2 would be. And I think looking at the time frame that we had to deliver it, and the sort of size of the team and stuff like that, like Ollie Ollie 2 was actually a massive achievement given how broken we were at the point having to kick it off in the first place. I think we were still fixing bugs on Ollie Ollie 1 whilst deep in sort of alpha of Ollie Ollie 2. Like there was no break there, and I guess that's just what sort of young small studios do all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you guys nailed it out of the park. Ollie Ollie 2, it's personally one of my favorite games of all time. I love it so much.
Wow,
I
thank you.
yeah, I played it so much upon release, and it released on PlayStation Plus, and so that's really how I got that's how I got the game, and I would play that game more than most AAA games at the time. It was I was fascinated by it, and it wasn't. For me, score attack games like that, like building combos, they never really gripped me, but there was something about the controls, there was something about the way the game played, and the responsiveness of it, and just landing those perfect landings. Everything just really, 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 really clicked with me, and I adore this game so much. Was the setting, like Hollywood, was that always the setting, or were there different settings?
The Hollywood stuff, I think, sort of thinking back to that process was what kind of what hook can we put on this game that will give us the flexibility and the freedom to visit more exciting places, and Hollywood. Being sort of a film type setting obviously allows you to go to Aztec and like future, and I'm trying to think of those levels. Yeah, like it gives you all of those different those possibilities, and I think it's weird. I don't know how much. Like obviously a lot of thought went into it at the time, but I think it was quite a quick decision. And once we'd come up with a ridiculous name, I think it just sort of fell apart, fell out of that decision. And it was like, yeah, do you know what? That kind of works. Like, otherwise, what are we going to do? Like, call it Ollie Ollie Universe and have it sort of, out of the world or something. I think it sat quite well with it.
It's a perfect.
I think to big up some other people on the project as well. Like there were Nikos Asfis, who's the senior programmer on both games. I think that was really beneficial to keep that lead in the same role. Like he was obviously very vested in Ollie Ollie 1, went on then to be lead programmer on Ollie Ollie 2, and he was someone he's a coder, but he's very much kind of design focused. So I think he had a lot of input into how something should feel and like how the game should be. And then with Ollie Ollie 2 as well, as Simon said, like I was busy with working on My Hero at the same time, and so we brought in Andrea Ciancaris, who was the lead designer, level designer, and obviously had a lot of input into the game as well. And I think quite a bit of that, so I might be totally wrong here, but I think quite a bit of that Hollywood sort of vibe came from Dre's input as well. Like I was very much like, I wanted to kind of be real world, like in Ollie Ollie 1, like kind of like Thrasher, like a skateboarding game, and we go San Francisco or New York or whatever, or Russia. And I think it was actually really good that we had that kind of fresh input from Dre, where he was like, it should be more bombastic. Like we can be in like Indiana Jones Aztec, or we can go off to like space, and that gives us like or like zombies at a fun fair. Like that kind of stuff just gave us so much more scope to do silly things and build the crazy environments that we have in there that give you the gameplay we wanted, which kind of isn't that doable if you make it real world.
Right.
Our lead artist, Manuel Hirari, like had worked with Dre previously and came on, and he did all of the art. Like it sort of looking back now at the sort of what was achieved, he actually achieved a hell of a lot, because he also sort of designed the kind of UI as well for it.
There was no separate UI artist, right? He did absolutely
everything. Wow. So yeah, he was. I mean, the whole team was under an insane amount of pressure, and it's interesting because ultimately we were under the sort of pressure that you hear about in horror stories of video games. You know, it's just kind of constant crunch, and
Right.
we just thought that's how you made video games. And you know, for a lot of studios of that size in their first few projects, it kind of has to be. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for any longer than a couple of years because people do just break down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, big props to the entire team that were working on that, because that was not easy, especially coming off the back of Ollie Ollie 1 for people who weren't fresh to the team. It was, you know, it was a hard slog. But yeah, I still remember the day that it came out and we had everybody in the office. And we'd bought all this food and booze because we thought that, you know, people were going to like the game. And the first review came through and it was like a 6 out of 10 from like Game or something like that. And we were like, holy shit, okay, take the champagne off ice, guys. Like they broke the embargo by about 4 hours.
Oh wow.
We didn't tell the team, but we were just like, okay, well, I let them know that they broke the embargo and they put the review down. And I was like, oh shit, like maybe that, you know, maybe this game hasn't done the thing that we wanted it to do. And you know, we waited for that moment that we knew that the embargo had lifted, and you know, literally that moment, like I think the first thing that came through was a 10 out of 10 from God Is a Geek or something, and then we got another 10. And then we just literally, like, the rest of that night was just a blur of yeah. It was one of those like very rare moments in life where we were just all, you know, just high on life, like just every 10 minutes like a new review score would come in and a new review, and we'd be reading them out together and cheering and hugging, and like we'd been through such hardship, and to actually get to that point was just, yeah, absolutely amazing. I know it meant a lot for everyone who was there. Like, you know, it's those sort of moments will, yeah, stay with you forever. Very exciting.
Yeah, I've played a ton of Tony Hawk Pro Skater and a ton of Skate, EA's franchise, and I still stick by this. And it might be crazy to say, but I think Ollie Ollie 2 is the best skating game ever made. So that is, yeah, I truly believe that. So Not a Hero came out. How was the transition to an action game like this?
So Not a Hero was actually prototyped at the same time as Ollie Ollie.
Okay.
So we met Sony and we showed them Ollie Ollie, and they said, "Do you want to bring the game to Vita?" And we were like, "Yeah, that'd be amazing." And then it took us, because we'd sort of not done that before and we'd not worked with someone like Sony before. It took us like 6 months, wasn't it, Si, to go from saying yes to actually signing contracts and getting going on it. Mm-hmm. And so in that 6 months, it was like, well, we can't really work on the Ollie Ollie prototype anymore because we don't quite know if it's going to be a Sony thing or not. And so I just started messing around with this other idea, which was like a cover shooter slidey thing.
Yeah, right.
And so I worked on that for 6 months, and I was like, well, I'm just going to set a goal and be like, after 6 months, we'll put that up and just see what people think. With like not like marketing it or even early access or anything like that, just put it up on the website, see what happens. Mm-hmm. So it was You're Not a Hero. So we put that up on the internet in I think it was like the November, and it through no pushing it anywhere, it ended up getting like 4,000 downloads. And a whole bunch of people played it on YouTube and said nice things about it and were kind of hyped about it. And it got a couple of like press spots in like PC Gamer and stuff, saying like, it's this free game and it's really good fun. So this is still before we started Ollie Ollie. And we were like, oh, maybe it'd be cool to like finish this and do something proper with it. And we got in touch with Devolver.
Yep.
Kind of went, we've done this thing, are you guys interested? And they kind of got back to us, and I think it was Rami Ishmael. I might have this wrong. Someone who was already working with Devolver had said like, oh, you should check out this free game. So they'd kind of been thinking about getting in touch with us anyway. So they were like, we're really interested in doing You're Not a Hero at that point in time. Like, we're interested in doing it with you guys. Are you interested in maybe making it into something more than it is right now? And we were like, well, unfortunately, we're just about to start Ollie Ollie. But we want to do it, so we said yes and then delayed starting it for a year. So we then went off, did Ollie Ollie for a year, and then I jumped immediately back onto them working on Not a Hero after that. So it wasn't like a transition into doing an action game, because we kind of already built both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually really beneficial, because obviously we learned so many lessons in doing Ollie Ollie that then when it came to doing Not a Hero, coming back to that project, it was like, okay, we figured out the importance of a good level editor, and we figured out the importance of like various other bits, not the importance of 60 frames a second or decent localization, which which screwed us later on. But yeah, it's good to then come back to that, having kind of done and finished something else. But it wasn't. I think it's a slightly bigger scope game. Like, you've got a lot more playable characters, and you've got Ollie Ollie doesn't have AI. Like, you've got AI enemies and like different stuff to deal with. So it's quite good to have finished something else first before starting on that. Although,
yeah, so
I'm sure Simon would agree. It's sorry, go
on. No, I was just gonna say it's also like it's. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's your first game to have a story. So like, what was the inspiration behind the story?
Trucks.
Yeah, there you go.
It's that game didn't have a story for a long time. That game was just a murder simulator, and we struggled for a long time to figure out what on earth the story was. And I think it kind of ended up at this point where it was like, so many action games, the story's just sort of bullshit. It's just kind of giving you any old reason it can find just to justify going off and shooting people in the face.
Yeah.
And then I think that kind of comedy element of the random text generator was kind of like, well, Bunny Lord's going to give you a reason that you're going to the place to go and kill a bunch of people. And most of the time his reasoning doesn't make sense for why you're going to go and do that. And kind of that's kind of where it started to be like, hey, this is kind of a comedy element to Not a Hero. It's like, you've got this goal, he wants to be the mayor and save the world, and he's come back in time, but it's not really explained what's going to go wrong in the future if he doesn't do this stuff, and you're really not entirely sure about his motives. But it's definitely fun to go and shoot people, and he's definitely very enthusiastic about it. So let's go and shoot some people.
I think it was quite interesting. Like, for ages there wasn't a story, and I still think that the story is still very sort of simplistic. But we went from a sort of not having Bunny Lord to having Bunny Lord and not really knowing what he stood for, then to sort of having Bunny Lord proper, like, in it, and then almost like the game just started to write itself once we realised that Bunny Lord was ostensibly like every stupid politician or every stupid person in power, like, ever. And, like, actually he was the forerunner to Donald Trump. Like, he
exactly.
It's kind of weird now realizing that game came out 2015 and then what happened in 2016. It's like, oh my days.
Yeah, so you guys predicted the future.
Yeah, I think there's been a few people who've kind of mentioned that and gone like, wow, this is ridiculous. Like, this guy, Bunny Lord's just saying absolutely ludicrous things to get votes, and you're like, oh wow, okay, that's what this game ended up. Sorry, that's what ended up happening in real life. And I think sort of, and it's something that we ended up learning for Laser League is Bunny Lord was an amazing thing to hang everything off, and he made everything else make sense in the game. Like, it gave us the opportunity to do all the things that we ended up doing with that game, and the answer was clear to all of us, because it was like, oh, this is what you would do, because Not a Hero is this game with Bunny Lord, and it's ridiculous, and therefore all of these things have to be ridiculous. And it set such a clear tone for the game. Whereas if you played it like at initially,
even 7 months before it was out.
Yeah, you'd be like, okay, what's the tone of this game? You'd be like, you shoot people, it's quite bright. Whereas when we got actual voice acting and all those sort of bits involved, that's where it sort of really started coming to life. And we said, you know what? Let's not make it American. We don't know anything about America. Let's make it British. Let's make it really like caricatures of different British characters, and make it local, make it something that we're able to understand, as opposed to pastiche. We can actually, obviously it's a pastiche, but it's a pastiche of something that we felt like we had ownership over, which obviously gives you a bit more scope and a bit more ability to push the boundaries.
Right, yeah, it gave me like a real like over the top Edgar Wright movie vibe.
I think there's two elements to my own. One is very similar to Ollie Ollie. Not a Hero only had one artist who did everything.
Wow.
So Jake Collins did like all of the stuff, from characters and animations to UI and all of that kind of thing. And then the other one is something that Simon did, which I think just so many people comment on it after they've played the game, which is for ages Bunny Lord was the only character with a voice. Like he'd brief you in the briefings, and he went and shot people, and they'd just scream and die. And there was a point. This was you, wasn't it, Si? You're like, they should all have a voice, like,
Yeah.
because we talked about it, we were like, oh, that's like Steve, and he's kind of, it's like Danny Dyer, and he's like, oh, lads, what you doing? But he doesn't actually do that in the game, right?
Yeah.
Or like, there's the Scottish hillbilly and whatever, but like, they didn't actually talk, and it was Simon that was kind of like, they should all have voices. Like that would be so much funnier if they all speak. This is way too late in the project to actually have done this. I think we ended up writing, is insane, wasn't it? We did like 1,200 lines of dialogue. So all of the characters.
Yeah, like we did what you shouldn't do at the end of a project. And thankfully, Devolver were flexible enough and the project was financially small enough and we were somehow like
enthusiastic
enough to make it happen. And we bought voice actors and we went and we recorded all this dialogue and we found this amazing voice actor and his girlfriend and her friend, and we did a day at a mate's studio down in Brighton. We did everything on the absolute cheap, and it was Not a Hero was sort of indie development at its like utmost, and like, you know, poor Devolver being sort of dragged along for the ride, I guess. But you know, the game that we ended up with was, you know, I look back on it because we're doing a port at the moment. I can't tell you what platform for, but it's quite good to actually go back to Not a Hero. So yeah,
it's an interesting one with that game that I'm immeasurably proud of how Ollie Ollie has done critically, right? And I'm really pleased with those games. I think they came out so well, and obviously I had less of a hand in Ollie Ollie 2, but like the team that worked on that absolutely smashed it. And I think critically with Not a Hero, like it didn't do quite, it's still super positive, right? I'm really happy with that. But I think obviously when you do something that has a story, and also when you try and do comedy, you'll automatically put some people off because it's just not their sense of humor.
Right.
But for me, like the coolest thing that came out of that game is the amount of like fan art people will send pictures of Bunny Lord that they drew in their like school notebook, or like people will write emails in the style of Bunny Lord to us to say like they really enjoyed the game, but they've written it like in the way that he talks. And so there's something really nice with that game that it was like it for some people at least, it really like hit a chord, and they wanted to be involved. We always joked that we knew we'd made it if someone cosplayed us, and someone cosplayed Bunny Lord at a Polish comic convention and like went around handing out like vote for me leaflets and stuff. Like, it's so awesome.
Great.
Inspired to do that stuff.
That is awesome. So with Laser League's in early access, correct? On Steam. Yep. Okay. So what was the philosophy behind this game?
So Laser League started off as a totally different game, basically, which was like, you know, Galaxian, where you're the spaceship at the bottom and the enemies fly down the screen.
Yes.
It started off as that, but it was 2-player, and you were both Galaxian at opposite ends of the screen. You tried to shoot each other, and me and Tom were on a train back that got delayed, and we ended up on this train for about 3 hours, and I had that on a laptop, and we just kind of like fast prototyped lots of ideas. One of those ideas was this power-up that basically, like, when you touched it, it shot a laser across the screen that stayed on and rotated. If you hit it, you died. But you had like guns and you had turrets and all this other shit you could do as well. But in kind of playing around with it, we were like, what if you just turn everything off and just have the laser things? And we did that, and it was like, that's the most fun.
Right.
Like, just those lasers. And so it went through a lot of iterations. For a while, it was kind of like a Super Hexagon game where it was single player. Those lasers turned on their own. You just had to survive as long as you could. And then it kind of became multiplayer, like 2v2. But the laser positions were random. So they'd just appear at random, and you'd end up with this crazy pattern by the end of it. And then, you know, I think That's like you can tell this bit, sort of where we got to the point where we had a really fun sort of 2-player local multiplayer, very basic graphics, but the gameplay was kind of good and sticky, I suppose. But I'll hand over for the second bit of the tale.
Yeah, we had what we knew was a sort of a really good toy, but we didn't know where we want to take it, whether we want to release it as is, as just a local multiplayer game, or if we wanted to do something like really ambitious with it. And we were all sort of taking breaks after Not a Hero had come out. We'd been like crunching ourselves into early graves for 3.5 years. Oops, sorry about that. Nice little reminder. Someone's coming in tomorrow, and I should plan for them coming in. And so John and I were up late in sort of these summer nights when we weren't working as much, and I think I was on a break, or maybe John was on a break at that point. Maybe both of us were on a break. And we were just playing Rocket League. He'd introduced me to Rocket League, and playing that, and looking into who Psionics were and what they'd done before. And one night, it was very late, and we probably had too much to drink, and playing it, and said, what if Ultra Neon Tactics, instead of just little dots and lines on the screen, like they're in these big futuristic sports stadiums, and it's like you're these players and you're these kind of future sports players, and it's all like super, 3D, and it's online, and it's blah blah blah. And we were like, fuck it, why don't we just try and do that? That'd be ridiculous, knowing full well that like doing something in 3D we'd not done before, B, like online, none of us really had much experience with that, and C, doing something like that was scaling up to a massive team and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
And we sort of sat on it for a while, and then I think just our ambition got the better of us. We kept sort of thinking, well, if this small team in America's done it, we can do it, and we just kept saying that, and here we are, weeks from launch, and we've actually achieved that aim. And it's quite funny because in the meantime, the what's the name of the something clip, not mini clip, something clip documentaries, John?
No clip.
Yeah.
Danny O'Dwyer.
Yeah, the Rocket League no clip documentaries have come about, and it's so funny to watch those and be like, oh right, you had like years and years and years of Unreal experience, and you'd done stuff before, and you'd had a prequel with a ridiculous name and all these sort of different things, and we just thought, oh my god, like, yeah, the fact that we've even managed to sort of achieve what we've achieved with Laser League, it's massive. Like, we have a single battle arena synchronous multiplayer game playing at 60 frames a second for the most part, unless your connection drops out, plays like it would do locally. Like, that was always a major question. We've done 3D. It looks awesome. We've got, people on Steam saying they really love it. Like, we don't have massive community of people playing it yet, but we've not even launched. So yeah, no, it's really exciting. And I think, once it comes out on console and 1.0 release, and we can't wait to see how it reviews. Whether we'll be sat looking at 6 out of 10 reviews, taking the champagne off ice, or the opposite. It's always crazy when you release a game, because you've worked for so long to get there, and often your perception of what you've created is so jaded and confused, and you have very little ability to look at it objectively at that point. It's funny. Every time we play it, though, we still say, do you know what? We've done something good here. We've made a good game. And if we're still, after 2 years, enjoying playing it online, we're hoping that lots of other people will really love it, when they play it for the first time. So watch this space. Watch this space.
Yep, exactly. So I've only got a couple more questions, 2 more. And this one is a bit out of left field, but how do you guys feel about the current condition of the game industry itself?
As in, is it the indie apocalypse? is that a nice way of asking?
Well, okay. I mean, you can definitely look at it like that, or just just games in general? Do you see them progressing, digressing? Do you is this the quote unquote golden age of video games?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I think you can look at it like there's a lot of battle arena games happening at the moment, and I think certainly it's certainly harder as an indie, especially a small indie, especially if like if we hadn't done any games yet. I think getting noticed as a new dev is harder
For sure.
because there are more games than there ever were before. But I think you only have to look at stuff like Dusk or Into the Breach, like some of those recent launches, like to know. I think Into the Breach is a really interesting one, right? Because you got people going, "Oh, pixel art's dead" or whatever, and it's like that's like a pixel art turn-based game,
Right. Yeah.
and it's still done really, really well. Like
Yep.
I think there's new paradigms, right, in games like Battle Arena. If you make a multiplayer game, right, multiplayer shooter now, and you don't have a Battle Arena mode, a Battle Royale mode, sorry, you probably made a bit of a mistake there. But I don't think the interest in other like interesting stuff has gone away. Like I think there's still definitely a ton of people out there who want to play a clever turn-based game or who want to play a first-person shooter that looks like Quake 1.
Right.
I think fun still wins out. I think there's
Sure.
still definitely that space for it, and I think there's more choice than ever. But I think we're probably I'm trying very hard not to say anything that will make me look stupid in 5 years, and it's completely different from what I'm about to say.
Yeah. Right.
But I think we're just like there's definitely it's an interesting time when you look at the amount of content that is out there and how do people find that good stuff, because it's never been easier to make a game, and that means there's a lot of stuff out there that's maybe just out there because it was easy to do and finish and launch. And so how that other sort of interesting stuff, whether that's really shiny and polished or whether that's just incredibly clever, even if it's not the most beautiful game ever. I think Ollie Ollie falls into that category, right? A lot of people are put off by the fact it doesn't look. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's really ugly." Of course, there's this other crowd of people who go, "I love the pixel art in that game."
Yeah,
So it's very subjective. But no, I think there's still tons of interesting games coming out. I think maybe in AAA, there's a lot more rules that have been set at this point, in terms of like what you can and can't do and what people expect. And if you're going to make another Far Cry, it's certainly got to do all the things the previous Far Cry has done and maybe a few bits more. But when you're working with 500 people in the budgets they've got, you can't take too many risks. And I think that's kind of standard. But then you look at stuff like, I haven't played it yet, but I'm really excited about the new God of War because it sounds like that's done some really interesting and groundbreaking stuff. So there's people, even at that end of the scale, there's still people innovating, I think.
Yeah, Cory Barlog is an awesome man. He is a great man. No, yeah, I definitely agree with that. So you mentioned the indie apocalypse. Is this a real thing?
Maybe.
Maybe.
There's always going to be that top end of indies that do really well, right?
Yeah. Right.
So no, there'll always be that top end of indies that do really, really well. I think there's just a lot more people putting games out now. Like there's a lot more people putting small games out, I guess not everyone, in the same way that if you're a band, not everybody is going to make a living from being a band.
Exactly.
Not everyone's going to be able to make a living from video games. It's just if you're a hobby video game maker now, it's way easy to put your content out there for other people to play and for other people to find.
Right. Yeah. So one of the systems, or the Nintendo Switch, right? It got released last year around this time, a month and a year ago, and it is just skyrocketing. It's going crazy, and everybody is just clamoring to port their games onto this system. And do you guys see that there might be an excessive amount of indie games being ported to the Switch, so that the storefront might be a little crowded and it might get difficult to port a game to the Switch?
Possibly, yeah. I've definitely heard that there was a golden era for that, and that was for people who were willing to take the risk right at the beginning before it had launched.
Exactly.
Uh, but yeah, I guess only time will tell. I do know that it's becoming tougher on that marketplace at this stage. So
Hmm.
yeah,
That isn't that much different from being, oh man, now I've said it and I can't even remember the name of the studio or the game, which is a really bad place to be when you started talking. The sort of Housemarques game that came out pretty
Oh
much on
yes,
PS4 launch, where you're flying around in a big
Resogun.
circle. Resogun.
Oh, I
I
love that
think
game.
with every single platform that launches, right, when you get PS4 comes out or Vita comes out or even the Switch comes out, like if you're one of those studios that takes that risk at the start and the platform's successful, it's going to be good for you. And if that platform then does well, obviously everyone's kind of going to jump on it.
Hmm.
Um,
Right. Yeah. Speaking of Score Attack games, Housemarque's Next Machina is a masterclass. I love that game so much. Housemarque is so talented. Um, they're really
they
great.
found their thing as well, didn't they? They
What's up?
found their they found their thing. They were
Yeah,
like, yeah,
arcade.
sick particle effects, lasery stuff, and
Yeah,
things explode. Like,
exactly.
yeah, make your eyes bleed on the TV screen. Put a lot of time into that one.
Exactly. So, my final question for you guys, um, and you can answer this however you want. What's the future looking like for Roll 7 right now?
it's looking pretty lasery. We'll find out in a few weeks just how lasery it's looking.
We
But
will.
Laser League, and then watch this space really. Like if Laser League is a major hit on launch, then probably a bit more Laser League.
Awesome.
Um, and if not, then we have a number of different projects in the back pocket. Which, if we told you, we'd have to kill you and all of your listeners, which would be a horrible bloodbath across the world, which wouldn't be nice.
Yeah,
So yeah,
no, that would not be good. You might get the FBI on you.
exactly.
You don't
Yeah.
want that. Thank you guys so much for doing this interview. Like, I don't know if I got it across how much I love the Ali Ali games and just really everything you guys put out. I feel like it's got a level of polish that even some AAA games now don't have, and just the controls are so refined. Um, every game that you guys put out is awesome. Ali Ali 2, again, is one of my favorite games ever made, and I really appreciate you guys taking this hour with me and talking about the the creative process behind what you put behind these games, and it's something I feel isn't explored enough in, or say for a YouTube or a small YouTube channel like us. It's something that I feel should be more investigated in, is the development behind these games, like Fury, which was my last interview, and then now all your games here at Roll 7. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this.
No worries. Thank you very much
Well,
for
thank you.
your time as well, and all the best with the channel.
If you haven't already checked out last month's interview with Benjamin Lemoulet, combat designer of 2016's Fury, please give it a watch. Every Monday, a new frame-by-frame episode is released where we discuss a famous director and then pitch our own movie in his or her style. Tuesdays are our rewinds in which Braden is currently playing through Donkey Kong Country for the first time. Thursday morning, a brand new episode of the Boss Rush podcast goes up, so make sure to tune in. On Fridays, our reviews go up if we have a game nearing completion. Be on the lookout for a Way Out review this Friday and a God of War review coming up in the near future. Saturdays, if we have some Let's Plays cooking, we get those to you around noon. Check out our Sea of Thieves hijinks as soon as you can, they're a riot. There's a bunch of content here on our channel, and we hope you embrace it and follow us as we bring you more on the daily. A few awesome announcements are incoming, so you're going to want to stay tuned with us through the coming weeks on either our podcasts or Twitter at BossRush_games. If you like what we got, let us know. If you don't, tell us what we can fix. Thanks a bunch. See you tomorrow for the next episode of the Boss Rush podcast. We can't do it without you.